I still remember the night Richard dragged me to that gala like it was yesterday. 25 years of marriage, and I was still just his shadow. He'd spent the whole afternoon barking orders at me in our bedroom. Wear something dark, Elena. Nothing flashy. And for God's sake, stay out of the photos. I stood there in my plain black dress, the one I'd worn to 3 funerals and 2 charity dinners, feeling the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. He didn't even look at me when he said it, just adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror like I wasn't even there. We arrived at the venue, all glittering chandeliers and champagne flutes clinking like tiny bells. Everyone was air-kissing and networking, the kind of crowd where power gets measured in smiles and handshakes. Richard strode in ahead of me, shoulders back, in flashing that politician's grin he'd perfected over the years. I followed a few steps behind, like always. When we reached the main ballroom, he stopped abruptly and turned to me. His voice dropped low, the way it did when he was trying not to cause a scene. "Stay back here," he said, nodding toward a dim corner near the service doors. "Near the plants or whatever. I don't want you embarrassing me tonight." Embarrassing him? I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. 25 years. 25 years of me cooking his meals, raising our kids, keeping the house perfect while he climbed the ladder. And this was what it boiled down to. I was the wife he was ashamed of. Too plain, too quiet, too old, maybe. Or just too much of a reminder that he hadn't married the trophy he thought he deserved. I stepped back into the shadows without a word. The music swelled, people laughed, and I watched him work the room. He shook hands with CEOs, leaned in close to whisper jokes to women half my age, posed for pictures with his arm around strangers who mattered more than I did. Every once in a while, his eyes would flick toward me, just a quick glance to make sure I was still hidden, still invisible. And I was, completely. Standing there in the dark, my hands clasped so tight my nails dug into my palms, something inside me finally cracked. Not anger, not yet. Just this hollow ache that had been growing for years. Who was I anymore? The girl who'd once dreamed of painting in Paris, of building something real? Or just Richard's accessory, the one he kept in storage until tax season or family photos? For the first time in decades, I let myself admit it, I'd become a ghost in my own life, a shadow wife in a marriage built on control and quiet humiliation. As the night wore on and the lights dimmed even further, I stayed right where he'd put me. Invisible, but not forever, not anymore. I was still standing in that same shadowed corner, the one Richard had assigned me like I was furniture nobody wanted to look at. The gala had hit its peak, laughter rolling across the room, flashbulbs popping like fireworks, everyone pretending the night was perfect. I'd stopped counting how many times Richard's eyes had darted my way, just to confirm I hadn't dared step into the light. Then the air changed. I felt it before I saw him. A ripple, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed for decades. Heads turned, conversations stuttered. But even the string quartet seemed to miss a beat. A man walked through the crowd, not hurried, not showy, just certain. Tall, silver at the temples now, but the same steady stride I'd once known by heart. He didn't stop to shake hands or smile for the cameras. He didn't glance at Richard, who was mid-laugh with some senator and suddenly looked like he'd swallowed glass. He came straight for me. The room seemed to shrink around us. People parted without realizing why. My pulse hammered in my ears so loud I barely heard the music anymore. He stopped maybe 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the one he'd gotten falling off his bike when we were 16. His eyes locked on mine, and everything else disappeared. "I've been looking for you for 30 years, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. It cut through the chatter like a blade. 30 years. The number landed like a punch. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against the wall behind me to stay upright. The entire ballroom froze. I swear it did. Waiters paused mid-step with trays of champagne. Women in sequins turned slowly, mouths half open. Richard's face went from smug to stunned in the span of a heartbeat. He actually took a step forward, then stopped, like he didn't know what protocol covered this. Alexander, because of course it was him, the boy who'd once promised me the world before life tore us in different directions, didn't look away. Not for a second. "I never stopped," he said, softer now, just for me. "Not once." My throat closed. 30 years of silence, and of burying every memory of him under laundry lists and school schedules, and Richard's endless expectations. 30 years of telling myself that kind of love only existed in movies, that I'd been foolish to believe it could be real. And here he was, not a memory, not a ghost, flesh and blood and the same quiet intensity that used to make me feel seen. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The words were trapped somewhere deep, tangled up with all the years I'd spent shrinking myself smaller and smaller. Richard finally found his voice. "Elena," he snapped, striding over, trying to reclaim control. "Who the hell is this?" But Alexander still didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on me, steady as ever. And in that moment, something inside me, the part I'd kept locked away since the day I said "I do," finally stirred. And the invisible wife was still standing in the shadows. But for the first time in forever, someone was looking right at her. I stood there in the shadows of that ballroom, Alexander's words still ringing in my ears. "I've been looking for you for 30 years. And suddenly the room wasn't a gala anymore. It was gone. The chandeliers, the champagne, Richard's furious glare. They all dissolved, and I was 21 again. It was late spring, the kind of warm evening where the air smelled like cut grass and possibility. We were on the roof of the old library at college, the one nobody was supposed to climb up to, but everybody did anyway. Blankets spread out, a cheap bottle of wine we'd split, stars so bright they looked painted on. Alexander had been quiet most of the night, which wasn't like him. And he was usually the one talking about philosophy, about the road trip we'd take after graduation, about how we were going to build a life bigger than both of us. But that night he just kept looking at me, like he was memorizing every line of my face. Then he reached into his pocket. I laughed at first, nervous because my heart already knew. He pulled out a small velvet box, the kind you see in movies but never think will actually show up in your life. "Elena," he said, and his voice cracked just a little. "I've spent every day since I met you trying to figure out how to deserve you. I still haven't figured it out, but I know I want to spend the rest of my life trying." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple gold band, one perfect emerald in the center, the color of the lake we used to swim in every summer. Not flashy, not expensive. Us. "I want you to be my wife," he said. "Not because it's what people do, because I can't imagine a single tomorrow without you in it." I remember the way my hands shook when I took it, the way the emerald caught the moonlight and threw green sparks across his face. I remember saying yes before the question was even fully out of his mouth, laughing and crying at the same time, pulling him down to kiss me like the world was ending and beginning all at once. That night we made promises under those stars. Promises about honesty, about adventure, about never letting life turn us into strangers to each other. We talked until dawn, about kids we'd name after poets, about a little house somewhere with a garden, about growing old on a porch swing arguing over crossword puzzles. It was pure, clean, the kind of love that felt like breathing. And then life happened. My mother got sick. His father lost everything in the market crash. Scholarships ran out. Jobs pulled us in opposite directions. Phone calls got shorter. Letters stopped. One day I looked up and realized I hadn't heard his voice in months, then years. I told myself it was just timing, that real love didn't die. It just got buried under bills and obligations and the slow, grinding weight of compromise. I told myself the ring was still in a box somewhere in the attic, wrapped in tissue paper, waiting for a life that never came. I married Richard instead. Safe, predictable, cold. And for 30 years, I carried that emerald memory like a bruise I never let anyone see. Until tonight. Until Alexander walked back into the room and looked at me the exact same way he had on that rooftop, like I was still the only thing in the world that mattered. I touched my bare ring finger out of habit. The one that had worn Richard's plain gold band for so long, it had left a permanent mark. And for the first time in decades, I let myself wonder, what if the love that never died was still waiting for me to come back to it? The memory hit me like cold water while I stood frozen in that ballroom, Alexander's eyes still holding mine. 1 second I was back on that rooftop with the emerald ring sparkling in the moonlight. The next, I was 22 again, sitting in the leather chair in his father's study, the kind of room that smelled like old money and older expectations. Mr. Hargrove, Alexander's father, didn't raise his voice. And he never had to. Men like him spoke softly, and the world bent to listen. He'd called me in alone. Alexander was away at some conference, thinking everything was fine. I'd come because I thought we were going to talk about the wedding. Instead, I walked into an ambush. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Eleanor," he said, folding his hands on the desk like he was about to deliver a verdict. "You're a bright girl, resourceful, but let's be realistic." He slid a folder across the polished wood. Inside were documents, my scholarship renewal papers, the letter from the graduate program I'd been accepted to, even the lease on the tiny apartment Alexander and I had talked about moving into after graduation, all of them stamped with the same red pending or conditional. "I've made a few calls," he continued. "Nothing permanent yet. But scholarships are competitive. Programs can always find a reason to reconsider. And your future, it's fragile. One wrong move and it disappears." My stomach dropped. I was already showing, just a little. I'd only told Alexander the week before. We'd laughed and cried and started dreaming about names. He'd kissed my stomach and promised we'd figure everything out. Mr. Hargrove leaned forward. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" I couldn't speak, just nodded once. He sighed, the sound of a man who'd already won. "Then you understand the stakes. Alexander's path is set. Law school, the firm, the board seat waiting for him. He's not built for struggle. And you—" He let the silence finish the sentence. "You're not from our world." He didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. I was the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. I'm the scholarship kid. The one who'd never fit in family photos at the lake house or holiday cards with matching sweaters. "I'm prepared to make this easy," he said. "Walk away now, quietly. No scene, no public breakup. You keep your scholarship. Quietly upgraded, in fact. Your graduate program stays funded. You'll have a clean start somewhere else. A generous check to help with expenses." He glanced at my stomach. "You can raise the child without dragging my son down with you." I stared at the folder. My hands were shaking so hard the papers rustled. "And if I don't?" I whispered. He smiled, small, polite, lethal. "Then everything stops. The money dries up, the doors close. Alexander will try to fight for you. He's stubborn that way. But he'll lose. He'll lose the future we've built for him, and you'll both end up resenting each other for it. Is that what you want for your child? A father who blames you every time a door slams shut?" I thought of Alexander's face when I told him about the baby, the way his eyes lit up like he'd won the lottery. I thought of the promises we'd made under the stars. I thought of how small I already felt next to his family's world, how every dinner, every weekend visit, made me feel like I was auditioning for a part I'd never get. And I thought of the baby growing inside me. What kind of life could I give a child if I burned everything down? Mr. Hargrove pushed a pen toward me. A single sheet waited. Simple, one paragraph. An agreement. I leave. I never contact Alexander again. In return, security, a future, a chance. I picked up the pen. I told myself it was noble, that I was protecting him, protecting our child from a war we couldn't win, and that real love sometimes means letting go. I signed. I walked out of that study and never looked back. I moved across the country, changed my number, buried the emerald ring in a box at the bottom of a drawer, told myself the ache would fade. It never did. And now, 30 years later, standing in the shadows of a gala while Alexander looked at me like no time had passed at all, I finally understood what I'd really done that day. I hadn't just sacrificed our love. I'd built the entire tragedy on one signature. One choice born from fear, from class, from the lie that love always loses to power. And the worst part? I still didn't know if I could ever forgive myself for it. The decision crystallized the moment I left Mr. Hargrove's study. I didn't go home, and I went straight to the little park near campus, the one with the bench under the willow tree, where Alexander and I used to meet after late classes. I sat there for hours, the emerald ring heavy in my pocket, turning it over and over like it might burn me if I held it too long. I knew what I had to do. I had to make it clean, final. If I left even a crack open, he'd fight. He'd throw away everything, his future, his family's plans, maybe even his own heart, just to chase me. And I couldn't let him do that, not when I was carrying our child, not when staying would only drag us both under. So I lied. I texted him to meet me there at dusk. When he arrived, he was smiling, wide, unguarded, the way he only ever smiled for me. He had a paper bag in his hand, take out from that Thai place we loved, like this was just another ordinary evening. "Aunt Elena," he said, leaning down to kiss me. I turned my face away at the last second. His smile faltered. I stood up. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. "I can't do this anymore," I said. He laughed, short, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I've been thinking a lot." My voice sounded flat, rehearsed. I hated it. "We're too different. You're heading somewhere big, law school, the firm, all of it. I'm not built for that world. I'd hold you back." "Eleanor, stop." He reached for my hand. I pulled it away. "I don't love you the way you deserve," I said. The lie tasted like acid. "I thought I did. I really did. But I don't. Not enough to marry you. Not enough to fight for this." His face changed, slowly, like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The light went out of his eyes first. "You're lying," he whispered. You're scared. My father said something, didn't he? He got to you." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "No one got to me. This is me. This is what I want." I pulled the ring from my pocket. The emerald caught the last of the dying light and threw one final green spark across his shirt. I held it out. "Take it back," I said. He stared at it like it was poison. "No." "Please, Alexander, take it." He didn't move, so I stepped forward, took his hand, and pressed the ring into his palm. His fingers closed around it automatically, but his whole body was shaking. "I'm leaving tomorrow," I told him. "I've already packed. Don't look for me. Don't call. Just let me go." "Why?" His voice cracked wide open. "Tell me the real reason. Give me that much." I almost broke then, almost told him about the baby, about the threats, and about how I was trying to save him from a life of resentment and regret. But if I said any of it, he'd never let me walk away. He'd burn everything down for us. So I said the cruelest thing I could think of. "Because I never really loved you," I lied. "It was just a college thing, a phase. I'm sorry." He staggered back like I'd hit him. The paper bag slipped from his fingers and hit the ground, pad thai spilling across the grass. He didn't even look at it. "You're destroying me," he said quietly. "You know that, right?" I nodded once. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not in front of him. "I know." He looked at the ring in his hand for a long time. Then he closed his fist around it so tight I saw blood well up where the band cut into his skin. "Go," he said. His voice was hollow. Just go." I turned and walked away. Every step felt like tearing something vital out of my chest. I didn't look back. If I had, I would have seen him drop to his knees in the grass, head bowed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I didn't see it, but I felt it. Every second of the next 30 years, I felt it. That was the night I killed the best part of both of us. The night I traded our future for a lie I thought would set him free. Instead, it chained him to the memory of me for 3 decades. And it chained me to the guilt of knowing I'd broken the only man who'd ever truly seen me. All because I believed love couldn't win against power. I was wrong, and the price we both paid was everything. After I walked away from Alexander that night in the park, I didn't go far. I moved to a different city. I changed my name on a few documents just enough to disappear quietly and tried to convince myself I was starting over. The baby, our baby, became the only piece of him I could still hold on to. I named her Grace. Every time I looked at her, I saw his eyes staring back. I met Richard 2 years later at a community college fundraiser. He was older, polished, already climbing the corporate ladder with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to question where the next paycheck was coming from. He pursued me the way men like him pursue things they think they're entitled to, methodically, persistently, like checking items off a list. I said yes because I was tired of being alone, tired of scraping by on part-time jobs and student loans I'd never fully pay off, tired of waking up every morning with the weight of what I'd done sitting on my chest. Richard offered stability, a house, health insurance, a future where Grace wouldn't have to worry about whether the lights stayed on. I told myself security was the same thing as safety. I was wrong. The marriage started small. Little rules at first. He liked the house a certain way, spotless always. He liked my hair a certain length, my clothes a certain colour palette. Neutral, understated, nothing that drew attention. He controlled the money from day one. Joint accounts, sure, but every purchase went through him. Groceries, clothes for Grace, even my own doctor visits. He'd review the statements like I was a teenager asking for allowance. "You don't need to worry about finances," he'd say, smiling that tight, satisfied smile. I've got it handled." What he really meant was, "You don't get a say." Freedom disappeared in increments so slow I barely noticed until it was gone. I stopped painting, my old hobby, the one thing that had always felt like breathing. The easel gathered dust in the garage. When I mentioned taking an art class, he laughed. "At your age? Come on, Elena, we've got real responsibilities now." He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. A sigh, a disappointed look, a casual comment about how some women just aren't cut out for more. That was enough to make me shrink back into silence. My opinions stopped mattering. My dreams were dismissed as childish. My worth, in his eyes, was tied to how well I played the role of the supportive, invisible wife. The worst part wasn't the control. It was how invisible I became to myself. And I'd catch my reflection in the hallway mirror, hair pulled back, face bare of makeup because he said it looked natural, and I wouldn't recognize the woman staring back. Where was the girl who'd once dreamed of galleries in Paris? Where was the mother who'd promised her daughter she'd never settle? I'd traded my soul for a mortgage and a minivan, and the worst part was I'd done it willingly. Richard called it love, protection, providing. But it wasn't love. It was a prison dressed up as security, walls made of polite words, locked doors disguised as for your own good. Every year that passed, I lost another piece of who I used to be. I stopped laughing as loud, stopped arguing, stopped hoping. I became the shadow he wanted, quiet, compliant, grateful. The perfect accessory for his rising career. The wife who never embarrassed him, who never outshone him, never asked for more than he was willing to give. And night after night, lying next to a man who never once asked how my day really was, I'd close my eyes and remember the rooftop, the emerald ring, the promises under the stars. I'd remember what real love felt like, and I'd wonder how I'd let myself end up here, trapped in an empty marriage that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like slow suffocation from the inside. 30 years of being someone else's version of a wife, 30 years of losing myself, one compromise at a time. Until the night Alexander walked back into my life and looked at me like I was still worth seeing. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible after all. 2 days after the gala, I couldn't take it anymore. The silence in our house felt louder than ever. Richard at the office. And Grace off at college, just me and the echo of Alexander's voice in my head. I've been looking for you for 30 years. I texted the number he'd slipped into my hand before Richard dragged me away that night. One line, coffee tomorrow. 10 a.m., the little place on Maple Street, the one with the blue door. He was already there when I walked in, sitting at the corner table by the window. Same steady gaze, same quiet strength. He stood the second he saw me, like manners still mattered after all this time. We ordered black coffee for him, chamomile for me because my hands were shaking too hard for caffeine. We sat. For a long minute, neither of us spoke. The clink of cups and the low hum of conversation around us felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I lied to you, I said. My voice came out small. That night in the park, everything I said, it was a lie. He didn't flinch, just watched me, waiting. Your father came to me, I continued, after we got engaged, after I told you about the baby. His breath caught, just a tiny hitch, but I heard it. He showed me how easy it would be to ruin everything, my scholarship, my grad program, our future. He said if I stayed, you'd lose it all, law school, the firm, the life they'd planned for you. He'd make sure of it. And if I left quietly, he'd make sure I didn't have to struggle, that the baby and I would be taken care of. Alexander's jaw tightened. His fingers curled around the mug so hard I thought it might crack. I was scared, I whispered. I was 22, pregnant, alone against a man who could snap his fingers and erase us. I thought I was protecting you, protecting our child from growing up in the wreckage of a fight we couldn't win. He closed his eyes for a second, like the weight of it was hitting him all at once. I signed his paper, I said. I walked away. I told you I didn't love you because I knew if I told the truth, you'd never let me go. You'd have fought, you'd have lost everything, and I couldn't live with that. The cafe noise faded. It was just us and 30 years of silence finally breaking open. I kept the baby, I told him. Her name is Grace. She's 29 now, smart, kind. She has your eyes. A tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. I never stopped loving you, he said, voice rough. Not for one single day. I looked for you everywhere. Private investigators, old friends, college alumni networks. I flew to cities on rumors. I kept that emerald ring in my wallet like a talisman. Every time I thought about giving up, I couldn't. Because giving up meant admitting you were really gone. He reached across the table and took my hand, gently, like he was afraid I'd vanish again. I married someone else eventually, he said. Tried to move on. It didn't work. She knew. We divorced after 5 years. I've been alone since, waiting, hoping, believing that if you were still breathing somewhere, you'd find your way back. I stared at our hands, his steady, mine trembling. I'm still married, I said, to Richard. It's it's not a marriage. It's a contract. He controls everything, the money, the house, me. I've spent 30 years being invisible, safe, but not alive. Alexander's thumb brushed over my knuckles, soft, familiar. Oh, you don't have to stay invisible anymore, he said. Not if you don't want to. I looked up at him, really looked. The silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, the same quiet love that had once made me feel like the center of the universe. I'm terrified, I admitted. Walking away from Richard means losing the only security I've known for decades. The house, the accounts, the life I built, even if it's hollow. He nodded. No judgment, just understanding. And staying means losing yourself forever, he said quietly. You've already lost 30 years. Do you want to lose the rest? The question hung between us like smoke. I thought of Grace, how she'd always asked why I never talked about my first love, how she'd once found an old photo of me and Alexander tucked in a book and asked who the boy was with the big smile. I thought of the paintings I'd never finished, the dreams I'd buried, the woman I used to be before I let fear decide my life. And I thought of Alexander, still here, still waiting, still looking at me like I was worth every second of those 30 lost years. I squeezed his hand. I don't know what comes next, I said, but I know I'm tired of being safe at the cost of being me. He smiled then, small, real, the first real smile I'd seen in decades. Then we figure it out, he said. Together, one step at a time, no ultimatums, no threats, just us. For the first time in forever, the weight on my chest lifted. Just a little, not gone, and but lighter. And in that quiet cafe on Maple Street, with coffee going cold between us, I finally let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, love doesn't always lose. Maybe sometimes, after 30 years of waiting, it gets a second chance. I came home from the cafe with Alexander still buzzing under my skin, like electricity I hadn't felt in decades. I told myself I'd be careful, that I'd think it through before I did anything drastic. But the second I walked through the front door, Richard was waiting. He was in the living room, lights low, a glass of scotch already half gone. The TV was off. No sports, no news. Just him, sitting in his leather chair like a king on a throne, staring at the empty fireplace. "You're late," he said. No greeting, no, "How was your day?" Just that flat, his clipped tone he used when he was about to dissect something. "I had coffee," I answered, keeping my voice even. I hung my coat, bought myself a few seconds. With who? I turned. He was looking right at me now, eyes narrow, the way he got when he sensed weakness. "An old friend," I said. He laughed, short, cold. "Don't insult me, Eleanor. I know exactly who it was." My stomach dropped. He set the glass down with deliberate slowness. "Alexander Hargrove," he said, pronouncing the name like it tasted bad. "The ghost you've been carrying around for 30 years. I saw the way he looked at you at the gala. Pathetic, really? Still chasing after scraps." I stayed silent. Anything I said would only feed him. Richard stood up, walked to the bar cart, poured another 2 fingers. "You think I didn't know? You think I married you blind?" I knew about the college boyfriend the first month we dated. I knew about the ring. I knew about the kid you never told him about. He turned, glass in hand. "And I made sure he never found you." The words landed like a slap. I actually took a step back. "What?" My voice came out hoarse. Richard smiled then, small, satisfied, the smile of a man who'd been holding the winning card for decades. "I paid people," he said simply, "private investigators to feed him false leads. I bought silence from mutual friends. When he got close, really close, I had my contacts at the firm drop subtle warnings. Job offers that dried up. References that mysteriously vanished. A few quiet calls to make sure certain doors stayed shut. Nothing illegal, just business. He took a sip, eyes never leaving mine. You were mine, Elena. And I wasn't about to let some sentimental college kid ruin the life I'd built for us. For me, I felt the room tilt. 30 years. 30 years of Alexander searching, of me believing he'd moved on, of both of us suffering in silence. And it wasn't fate. It wasn't timing. It was Richard, my husband. The man who'd promised to protect me had spent 3 decades making sure I stayed broken. You kept us apart, I whispered. You destroyed him. You destroyed me. Richard shrugged, like we were discussing the weather. I gave you security, a house, a daughter who never wanted for anything. You wanted to play house with a dreamer who'd have ended up broke and bitter. I saved you from that, from yourself. I stared at him, at the man I'd shared a bed with for 28 years, and the man who'd signed report cards and paid orthodontist bills and never once asked if I was happy. And I saw him clearly for the first time. Not a provider, not a protector, a jailer. He'd controlled the money, the schedule, the conversations. He'd clipped my wings so slowly I forgot I could fly. And when someone from my past finally found the cage, he'd made sure the door stayed locked. You're a monster, I said. The words came out calm, final. Richard's smile faded. Careful, Eleanor. You walk out that door chasing fairy tales, you lose everything. The house, the accounts. Grace's tuition if I decide to pull it. You'll be starting over at 50-something with nothing. You think Loverboy's going to pick up the pieces. He's got his own life now. You're yesterday's news. I looked around the room. The perfect furniture. As the spotless surfaces, the life I'd polished to a shine while I slowly disappeared inside it. Then I looked back at him. I already lost everything that mattered, I said. 30 years ago. You just made sure I never got it back. I turned and walked upstairs. He didn't follow. He didn't have to. He thought he still held all the cards. But he was wrong. The stakes had just skyrocketed. This wasn't about choosing between safe and love anymore. This was about choosing between staying in a prison built by a man who'd spent decades destroying 2 lives to keep control, and finally breaking free, no matter what it cost. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking, and pulled out my phone. I texted Alexander one line. He's the reason you never found me. Then I started packing. Not everything. Just enough to walk away. All because the monster wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He was the man I'd married, and I was done letting him win. The night after Richard dropped his bomb, the casual confession that he'd spent 30 years sabotaging Alexander's search for me, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, listening to the house settle around me like it always did. The faint hum of the fridge downstairs, the occasional creak of the floorboards cooling, the steady tick of the clock in the hallway that Richard had bought because it looked expensive. For once, those sounds didn't feel comforting. They felt like bars. I kept replaying his words. You were mine, Eleanor. Not I loved you. Not even I wanted you. Just possession, ownership. Like I was a house he'd bought and renovated to his specifications. By morning, something inside me had shifted. Not exploded, not yet, but cracked wide open. The woman who'd spent decades shrinking to fit his expectations was still there. But she was sharing space with someone else now. Someone angrier, someone tired, someone ready. Richard came downstairs at 7:15 like clockwork, already in his pressed shirt and tie, scrolling emails on his phone. He didn't look up when I walked into the kitchen. Coffee's ready, he said automatically. Black, 2 sugars. I didn't move to pour it. I'm not making your coffee today, I said. He glanced up then, eyebrows lifting just enough to show mild surprise. Excuse me? I said I'm not making it. My voice was steady, not loud, not shaking, just clear. I'm not doing a lot of things anymore. He set the phone down, slowly. The way he did when he was about to correct someone. Hannah, we've talked about this. You get emotional sometimes. It passes. This isn't emotional, I told him. This is done. He laughed, short, dismissive. Done? You're 54 years old. You have no job, no savings in your name, no marketable skills outside of running this house. You walk out, you walk into nothing. You really want to end up in some one-bedroom apartment eating ramen while your college boyfriend plays knight in shining armor for a month before he realizes you're not the fantasy he remembers? I looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd controlled every dollar, every decision, every inch of space I occupied, at the man who'd turned my life into a beautiful cage and called it love. I'd rather have nothing and be myself, I said, than have everything and be invisible. His face hardened. You're being dramatic. Sit down. We'll talk when I get home tonight. No. I stepped forward. First time in years I'd closed the distance instead of backing away. I'm not sitting down. I'm not waiting for you to get home. I'm leaving. Today. He stood up then, chair scraping back. You don't get to just decide that. I already did. I turned and walked upstairs. He followed, footsteps heavy, voice rising behind me. You think you can just walk out? The accounts are in my name. The deed is in my name. You leave, you get nothing, not a cent, not even the clothes on your back if I say so. I stopped at the bedroom door, hand on the knob. Then keep it all, I said. Keep the house, keep the money, keep the life you built for yourself. I don't want any of it if the price is staying here one more day. I went inside. I pulled the suitcase I'd half-packed the night before from under the bed and started filling it. Not everything, just what mattered. A few clothes, the old sketchbook I'd hidden in the back of the closet for years, the small wooden box with Grace's baby pictures, and the one thing I'd never let him touch, the faded photo of me and Alexander on that rooftop, tucked inside my college journal. Richard stood in the doorway, arms crossed. This is insane. You'll regret it. You'll come crawling back in a week. I zipped the suitcase, looked at him. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe I'll be broke and scared and alone. But at least I'll be choosing. For the first time in 30 years, I'll be the one deciding what my life looks like. Not you, not your father, not fear. I picked up the bag, walked past him. And he didn't try to stop me physically. He never had. Control for him had always been quieter, colder. Words, money, silence. At the front door, I paused, turned back one last time. I used to think you were saving me, I said. Now I see you were just keeping me. I opened the door and stepped out into the morning light. The air felt sharp, cold, alive. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack a rib. I had no plan, no apartment waiting, no guarantee Alexander would even want the mess I'd become after all this time. But I had something I hadn't had in decades, a choice. And for the first time since I was 22, I wasn't running away from love. I was running toward the possibility of getting myself back. I got in the car, the one in my name, the one I'd paid for with birthday checks from my mother before she passed, and drove. Not to Alexander, not yet. First, I needed to remember who Elena was before she became someone's wife, someone's shadow, someone's regret. The rebellion wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, it was final, and it was mine. 3 months after I walked out of that house with one suitcase and zero plan, I wasn't the same woman anymore. I'd moved into a small one-bedroom apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just high ceilings, good light, and rent I could actually afford on my own. The first paycheck came from a part-time gig at a local art supply store. I'd started there because the owner needed someone to manage inventory and teach a few beginner classes. I hadn't touched a brush in 25 years, but the second I handed a customer a set of watercolor pencils, something inside me clicked back into place. Like a muscle memory I'd forgotten I had. Then Alexander called. Not to sweep me off my feet with grand gestures, he knew better than that. He offered me a job. Nothing glamorous, administrative coordinator at his consulting firm. Flexible hours, decent pay, health benefits. "It's not charity," he said quietly over coffee one afternoon. "We need someone reliable who actually listens, and I think you'd be good at it." I took it, not because I needed rescuing, because I needed to start building something that was mine. The first few weeks were strange. I had my own desk, my own email, my own decisions about how to organize files, schedule meetings, handle client follow-ups. No one hovered. No one questioned every dollar I spent on office supplies. When I suggested a new system for tracking project timelines, people actually listened and implemented it. I came home every night exhausted in the best way, the tired that comes from using your brain, not from shrinking yourself smaller. Money started to feel different too. My paycheck went straight into an account with only my name on it. I paid rent, bought groceries without running numbers in my head, splurged on a new set of brushes and canvas one Saturday because I could. I opened a small savings account for Grace, just in case. I even started a retirement fund. Tiny contributions, but they were mine, and the painting came back. I set up an easel in the corner of my living room. Nothing big, just enough space for me to lose hours mixing colours, layering strokes, remembering what it felt like to create instead of maintain. Some nights I painted the rooftop from memory. Stars, emerald sparks. It's Alexander's young face laughing up at the sky. Other nights I painted myself, older, softer around the edges, but standing taller than I had in decades. Alexander and I weren't rushing anything. We met for dinners, long walks, quiet evenings where we talked about everything we'd missed and everything we still wanted. He never pushed, never asked me to define what we were. He just showed up, steady, patient, the same man who'd waited 30 years without bitterness. But the biggest change wasn't him, it was me. I laughed louder. I spoke up in meetings. I wore colours I liked instead of neutrals that blended into the background. I stopped apologising for taking up space. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was waking up, reborn, not because a man came back into my life, but because I finally let myself come back into my own. The love was there, a quiet and real and growing again. But the real freedom, that was mine alone. Richard didn't let go quietly. The first shock came 2 weeks after I filed for divorce. A certified letter from his attorney demanding I return marital assets, which apparently included the furniture I'd left behind, half of Grace's college fund, the part he'd contributed, and even the wedding gifts from 30 years ago. Then the bank accounts I'd never touched were frozen. My name was still on some of them from the early days, and he used that leverage to lock everything down. Next came the threats, veiled at first, then blatant. Voicemails. "You think you can walk away and keep breathing easy? I know people, Elena. I can make this ugly." Texts from numbers I didn't recognize, photos of my new apartment building, timestamps when I came and went. He wanted me scared. He wanted me to crawl back. I didn't. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She looked at the financials, the paper trail, and said 3 words that changed everything. "He's over-leveraged." Then the real bomb dropped. One evening, Alexander called me, voice low and urgent. "Turn on the news." I did. Breaking story. Federal agents had raided the offices of Richard's firm. Something about suspicious wire transfers, offshore accounts, layers of shell companies, money laundering allegations tied to international clients no one had properly vetted. The FBI was involved, subpoenas flying, names being named. Richard's face was on every local channel, pale, tight-lipped, being escorted out in cuffs while reporters shouted questions. I sat on my couch, remote in hand, I staring at the screen. Karma doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it wears a badge and a search warrant. The next morning, my lawyer called. They've got enough to freeze his assets, personal and business. The divorce proceedings are on hold until the criminal investigation clears. But here's the good part. Anything you can prove was marital property before his extracurricular activities is still protected. And since he locked you out of accounts to punish you, that looks like financial abuse. We've got leverage now. I hung up and walked to the window. The city stretched out below me, alive, messy, full of possibility. Richard had spent decades building walls around me, thinking control was the same as power. Now those walls were crumbling under the weight of his own choices. And me. I wasn't hiding in the rubble anymore. And I was standing outside it, breathing free air, with a job I liked, a paintbrush in my hand, a man who loved me without needing to own me, and a daughter who was proud of me for the first time in years. The war wasn't over, but for the first time I wasn't fighting from inside the cage. I was fighting from the outside, and I was finally winning. 6 months into the divorce proceedings, while Richard's legal team scrambled to distance him from the FBI's widening net, and Alexander waited patiently without ever asking me to hurry, I finally understood what freedom really felt like. It wasn't the absence of Richard's rules. It wasn't Alexander's quiet love waiting in the wings. It wasn't even the paycheck hitting my account every 2 weeks, or the apartment keys that only I carried. It was the moment I stopped measuring my worth by who wanted me. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I sat at the small kitchen table in my apartment, surrounded by half-finished canvases and a cooling cup of tea. Grace had just left after a weekend visit. She hugged me longer than usual, whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom," and drove back to campus. Alexander had texted earlier, "Dinner tonight? No pressure, just us." I hadn't answered yet. I looked around the room. Paint-splattered drop cloths on the floor. A stack of rejection letters from galleries I'd finally worked up the courage to submit to. And one small acceptance email tucked in an envelope like treasure. A single photo on the fridge, me, Grace, and Alexander at a park last month, laughing, wind in our hair, no one posing for perfection. I picked up my phone, opened Alexander's message. I untyped slowly. "I need some time, not from you, from deciding anything at all. I love what's growing between us, but right now I need to finish falling in love with me first." I hit send before I could second-guess it. His reply came almost immediately. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. I've waited 30 years. I can wait a little longer for the woman who's finally choosing herself." I set the phone down and cried, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of it. No guilt, no fear of losing someone, just the clean, sharp feeling of standing on my own feet for the first time in my adult life. I didn't choose between two men. I didn't trade one cage for another, no matter how gilded or kind the bars might be. I chose me. The next week I turned down a dinner invitation from Alexander. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because I wanted to spend the evening alone in my studio, finishing a painting I'd started months earlier. A woman stepping out of deep shadow into golden light, her back to the viewer, shoulders squared, no one holding her hand. When it was done, I signed it simply. Elena, no last name, no husband's name, just mine. I hung it above the couch where I could see it every morning when I woke up. Richard's threats still came in waves, more legal papers, more attempts to paint me as unstable, more whispers through mutual friends that I'd regret this. The FBI investigation kept expanding, his assets stayed frozen. He was losing the empire he'd built on control, and part of me felt a quiet pity for the man who'd mistaken domination for strength. But pity didn't pull me back. Nothing did. I kept working at the firm, loving the routine, and the colleagues who treated me like a person instead of an accessory. I kept painting, selling a few pieces online, enough to buy better supplies, and feel the thrill of someone else wanting what I'd created. I kept showing up for Grace, Honest conversations, no more hiding the cracks in my past. And I kept showing up for myself. Therapy once a week, long walks alone, nights where I read books I'd always wanted to read instead of folding someone else's laundry. Some days I missed the old safety net. Some nights the loneliness crept in. But every time it did, I looked at that painting on the wall and remembered. I wasn't choosing between Richard's prison and Alexander's promise. I was choosing freedom. Real freedom. The kind that doesn't depend on a man's love, a man's money, or a man's approval. The kind that says, I am enough, right here, right now, exactly as I am. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. Not because someone else told me so, but because I finally told myself and meant every word.